The administration of former U.S. President Donald Trump made it clear to Ukraine that essential U.S. security guarantees depend on Kyiv's formal agreement to a peace deal, which will likely require significant territorial concessions regarding the Donbas region. According to the Financial Times, citing several individuals familiar with the negotiations, Washington also indicated that it could offer Ukraine more weapons to strengthen its army in peacetime if Kyiv agrees to withdraw troops from those parts of the eastern region it currently controls. However, Reuters was unable to promptly verify these statements or confirm their accuracy. Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky previously stated that the U.S. document on security guarantees for Ukraine is 100% ready, and Kyiv is now awaiting agreement on the time and place for its signing. President Zelensky has stated that Ukraine's territorial integrity must be fully maintained in any potential peace agreement. However, Ukraine is growing skeptical that Washington will actually commit to providing long-term security guarantees. A high-ranking Ukrainian official told the Financial Times that the United States appears to hesitate every single time it comes to signing these guarantees. It is reported that the government in Kyiv requires the guarantees to be confirmed before making any territorial concessions. However, the United States government currently believes that Ukraine should give up Donbas for the sake of bringing a definitive end to the conflict, and is not pressuring Vladimir Putin to abandon this demand. This is absolutely untrue. The primary and singular role of the United States in the peace process is to bring both sides together to reach a final agreement, said official White House Deputy Press Secretary Anna Kelly.
Secondly, this weekend on Sunday, there will be another round of negotiations between Russia and Ukraine. I'm very curious to know, could you tell us exactly how the president will be involved in this, if at all? Will he be speaking directly with President Putin or President Zelensky before these meetings?
At the moment, I have no scheduled calls to announce. The president remains involved as advisors keep him updated on these negotiations, including Jared Kushner and Special Envoy Witkoff. Last weekend, they had a multilateral meeting that was lesser known but historic. The president's team brought both sides of this war to the table to move forward on the path to peace. So the president is not giving up on the peace process. He has, of course, met with President Zelensky. Another person familiar with the U.S. position also specifically noted that Washington is not trying to force Ukraine into any territorial concessions, adding, however, that security guarantees depend entirely on whether both sides agree to a peace deal. In closed-door talks in Abu Dhabi, official representatives from Kyiv and Washington deliberated on potential mechanisms for stabilizing the ongoing situation in eastern Ukraine. According to the New York Times, one of the proposals considered was the deployment of an international contingent in the occupied part of Donetsk region. According to the publication's sources, the discussion involved creating a security zone with the participation of peacekeepers from countries that are not members of NATO. Such an approach, in the view of the Ukrainian and American sides, could reduce tensions while also circumventing the Kremlin's fundamental rejection of the alliance. Moscow, however, took an extremely hardline stance. The Russian delegation was represented by Deputy Foreign Minister Sergei Ryabkov, and its position boiled down to a single demand: the complete withdrawal of Ukrainian forces from Donetsk Oblast without any interim solutions. In an effort to provide justification for its various demands, the Russian side makes specific reference to some secret agreements that were reportedly reached last summer in Alaska between Vladimir Putin and Donald Trump. According to the official Moscow version, these agreements provide for the transfer of control over the entirety of the region to Russia, including areas that are currently still under Ukrainian control. According to reports published by the New York Times, the details of the so-called Alaskan Agreement have not been officially published. But Russia uses it as a primary argument to firmly reject any compromise formats and international initiatives. It was also previously reported when the next meeting between Ukraine, Russia, and the United States will take place. According to the president of Ukraine, during the previous negotiations, the parties managed to discuss various issues of a more military nature. And preliminarily, the teams will meet again this Sunday, February 1st. At the same time, Zelensky stated that the document on American security guarantees for Ukraine is already 100% ready and only needs to be signed. The key issue in the trilateral negotiations between Ukraine, the US, and Russia that took place this week was the future of Donbas. The Kremlin is demanding the transfer to Ukraine of the remaining part of Donetsk region under its control as a key condition for ending the war, and at the moment, this is the main obstacle to reaching an agreement. Moscow is promoting the so-called Anchorage formula, which envisions full Russian control over Donbas and freezing the front lines in other areas. That's all for now. Share your thoughts in the comments. Leave a like and see you next time.
Wants more than just Donbas. His ambitions are much broader. New assessments by Western experts and intelligence agencies indicate that the Kremlin's territorial demands have long gone beyond the borders of Donetsk and Luhansk regions. According to the Institute for the Study of War, Moscow does not see Donbas as its ultimate goal, but rather as one element of a much larger strategy aimed at shifting the security balance in Eastern Europe and putting pressure on the West as a whole.
And now, more information in our report. My name is Yevhen Sirov. This is the Glavred channel. Subscribe and give us a like. Let's get started.
Political analysts have noted that statements contradicting the narrative of limited war aims are surfacing with increasing frequency in Russian public rhetoric. On the one hand, certain Russian negotiators have begun to claim that the withdrawal of Ukrainian troops from the Donbas region could be a viable pathway toward a lasting peace. On the other hand, high-ranking Russian officials and military commanders openly talk about the need to create so-called buffer zones in the territories of Kharkiv, Sumy, and also Dnipropetrovsk regions. According to experts, this directly indicates Russia's intention to expand its control far beyond the current front line. ISW reports emphasize that the Kremlin's demands are not limited to just territories. At the same time, Moscow is putting forward political and strategic conditions that concern the entire European security system. Among them is the insistence on NATO abandoning further expansion and revising the alliance's role in Eastern Europe. Thus, according to Western analysts, the war against Ukraine is being used by Russia as a tool to pressure the West in order to weaken its institutions and influence. Additionally, we draw attention to the fact that the rhetoric of Russian politicians within the country is very dynamic. In the State Duma and on federal television channels, statements have repeatedly been made that the issue of Donbas is only part of a broader confrontation with Ukraine. Statements by Russian officials include calls to change Kyiv's political course, as well as ideological accusations that the Kremlin traditionally uses to justify aggression. According to experts, this confirms that Russia's territorial claims are closely intertwined with its attempts to influence Ukraine's domestic politics. The Kremlin's position is also clearly evident in the context of international negotiations. The Russian side has repeatedly stated that hostilities will not cease without territorial concessions from Ukraine. At the same time, according to Western media reports, the demands from Moscow concern not only the occupied areas of Donbas, but also an extensive level of control over Ukraine's eastern and southern regions. The Ukrainian authorities categorically reject such approaches, emphasizing that any attempts to impose peace in exchange for territory are unacceptable. President of Ukraine Zelensky has repeatedly stressed that Ukraine will not agree to the loss of its territories and will not recognize any ultimatums from the aggressor. According to him, making concessions to the Kremlin will not lead to lasting peace, but will only create the conditions for a new escalation. This position is also shared by many of Ukraine's Western partners, who believe that satisfying Moscow's maximalist demands will only encourage further aggression. Assessments by American and European intelligence agencies also indicate that Putin's strategic goals may extend far beyond the Donbas. A significant number of analytical reports emphasize that the Kremlin seeks to re-establish full control over Ukraine as a whole, or at the very least, to turn it into a dependent and weakened state. These expansive geopolitical ambitions are explained and motivated not only by military strategic interests, but also by the deeply rooted ideological beliefs of the Russian leadership.